Waste Management Complex. It's down towards the southern border of the Idaho National Laboratory. It is 96 acres. It is, you know, when some talk about radioactive waste management, essentially what you're talking about is disposing of it. 30-some acres of that burial ground is actually containing nuclear waste. Waste was brought in from the rest of the weapons complex, a lot of it from Rocky Flats in Colorado, so it's contaminated with plutonium. And it was brought to Idaho and buried in pits and trenches. All the pits and all the trenches were unlined right above Idaho's drinking water. And when I say pit, you know, they're not holes in the ground. This is a big pit. Those are vehicles in the bottom of that depression, and that's a pit. A trench is, on the simplest terms, a longer and more narrow pit. But what's important, the difference between a pit and a trench, the trenches held waste that was more radioactive. And the reason it was put in trenches was because it could be dropped into the trench and then covered with dirt in a single push of a caterpillar blade, and that helped protect the workers who were disposing of the waste itself. So over the years, from the early 1950s to 1970, plutonium-contaminated waste came to Idaho from the Rocky Flats plant in Colorado. At first, it came in, you know, there's a semi-truck, right? It came in and was offloaded manually, piled fairly carefully, and then covered with dirt. But what management noticed fairly early on, those guys right there at the back end of the truck, they were getting a fair amount of radioactive exposure. So the Idaho National Laboratory changed the technology to a dump truck. Dump trucks would back up to these unlined pits, dump the barrels in, higgledy-piggledy, helter-skelter. Many of those barrels would crack as they were going down the incline. Sort of to add insult to injury, some of the waste barrels contain substances that would be explosive or catch on fire if they were exposed to air or water. So INL wanted that stuff to be removed before those particular barrels were buried. So one technique for doing that was to simply shoot a hole in the barrel. This gentleman has a rifle. He's shooting and catching, setting on fire one of the waste barrels to burn off the, in this case, sodium potassium before the waste was buried. So at the end of the day, the Department of Energy itself, everybody understood that about half of those barrels were broken open before they were ever covered with dirt. And then comes spring snowmelt. INL is obviously on a high desert, not a lot of surface water, but we all know every once in a while in Idaho we have a very fast spring, fast snowmelt, and the burial grounds would fill with water. The deepest spot on the lowest spot in the burial grounds would be an open pit, and the open pits would fill with water, and then that water would percolate down and drive contamination into the aquifer. In the very earliest days, the National Academy of Sciences predicted that it would take 80,000 years for nuclear waste buried above our water to reach our water. In fact, it only took about 30. So here's the response, what is being done to address it. And I'd like you to kind of ignore those buildings. That's a different waste problem. And focus just on this end of the triangle. In the 1990s, because of a lot of pressure from both the state of Idaho and the Snake River Alliance, the site started to try to dig up the plutonium-contaminated waste. Its first effort, it was costing $1 million a cubic meter to dig up the waste. And Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer are not going to pay $1 million a cubic meter when you're looking at acres and acres of waste. So the INL went kind of back to the drawing board and came up with a much more straightforward but still quite effective response. Those white buildings, they're not actually buildings, they're not actually tents, but they are made of fabric. They're big enclosures, and I mean there are acres covered under these big enclosures. And those enclosures have been put up so that the waste underneath them in the pit can be dug up, and the dirt won't scatter about and blow away and contaminate a bigger area that is already contaminated. So here's the way it's working. There's just a track hoe under this enclosure. There are cameras on the track hoe, and people outside the enclosure are looking to see where the shovel is and if that's waste or just dirt, and dig it up. And then the waste is put on trays. It's taken into a kind of processing station halfway between the enclosure and the outside. And the waste, these people are fully protected, and by the way, the person driving that track hoe is in both a full contamination suit, and he's always breathing air from the outside of the building. The waste is sorted and put in an appropriate waste stream place, and at the end of the day, by the end of 2018, INL will have dug up between 5.5 and 6 acres of targeted waste. There will always be waste there. It will always have to be managed, but the real nasty stuff will be dug up by the end of 2018. So here it is. It is a beautiful spot. Those are beautiful vistas. And I encourage everyone to go to eastern Idaho and see the place where Idaho National Laboratory is. But let's think about what lies ahead. The Snake River Alliance would like, obviously, for the sustained efforts that are happening now to clean up the nuclear waste to continue so that our drinking water is not at risk. And the efforts to clean up will have to continue for decades. You know, I've said that treatment is ongoing, but it's a long process, and we have to maintain focus on that particular ball. But you know, other people have different notions of what the future of the Idaho National Laboratory should be. Here's a picture of 3 Mile Island. That's the nuclear power station that gave rise to the Snake River Alliance in the beginning. And so it's a suitable place to look to think about the nuclear renaissance. You know, before the Fukushima nuclear disaster, the nuclear renaissance, even then, was maybe more rhetorical than real. But even now, even after Fukushima, those advocating a nuclear renaissance are pushing forward, but they recognize that the biggest Achilles heel of nuclear power is nuclear waste. So I think, you know, that's what INL has to, not INL, the people of Idaho have to really think about. Here's another shot of 3 Mile Island. This is in Idaho at the site. This is where all the core debris from the 3 Mile Island nuclear meltdown ended up. When the last shipment left 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania, I happened to be in the east, and the headline in the New York Times was that 3 Mile Island had been cleaned up. But because I'm from Idaho, I knew 3 Mile Island hadn't been cleaned up. It had just been shipped down. We are always going to be a target for nuclear waste. Already the state of Idaho has agreed to accept research quantities of commercial irradiated fuel. We will have ongoing nuclear waste disposal at the Idaho National Laboratory from the nuclear navy, from the research activities that already go forward there. But we will also perhaps be a target for consolidated nuclear waste storage. Again, because nuclear proponents want to solve the political problem of nuclear waste And the way you do that is you get it out of sight. Idaho is, if you're in Pennsylvania or Chicago, it's the middle of nowhere. And we have a big, big site here. It's already controlled by the federal government. It's already contaminated by the federal government. And Idaho has to stay alert to the threats that may be before us. Focus on cleanup. Focus on not getting more waste into Idaho. The Snake River Alliance has stood up for that since 1979, 33 years. Please stand up with us. We're easy to get in touch with. You know, I think our work is very important. It's also fun. We have a lot of fun. We enjoy one another, and please join us.
We hope you found this program as informative as we did. If you would like to support this group, I'd suggest that you go to their website, snakeriveralliance.org. If you'd like to make a donation, they'd certainly welcome any of that. And also, if you'd like to join their membership, it's $25 for a single and $40 for family. Very important work. Thank you. Joe?
Yes, the National Academy of Science, wow. They stated that their expert opinion was that it would take 80,000 years for the pollution to reach the water table, and actually it took 30 years. That's what happens to expert opinions in this particular area. That's why watchdog groups like the Snake River Alliance are so necessary and worthy of your support. Well, anyway, thanks for watching.